On today's podcast, we're talking about identifying and proactively supporting emerging leaders within your team and organization so they can blossom into the future cultural ambassadors your organization is going to need in order to thrive. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everybody, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are, however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome back. So glad you're here. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. So glad you're here. This continues to grow and spread. We got well over, I think, close to 170 episodes now. So great that we continue to pick up so many new listeners. And folks, welcome. Hope you will go back, check out old episodes. So much great stuff out there. Micropods about topics and things I think will add value to your wherever you are in your journey. And at the same time, great conversations with thought leaders and folks that have joined me along the way. Really, really great stuff. So hope you'll go back and check those out. If you are an OG, somebody that's been with us from the very beginning, welcome back. Thank you for making this a place, and so glad it continues to add value to you and your life, your work, how you think about your own leadership, where you are in life, what you're trying to do, and the cultures that you're trying to create with the people around you. So if you will do me a quick favor before we start today, if you will stop and rate the podcast 5 stars, of course. That's how the algorithms work. They want you to rate it and so people can find it more easily. So rate it 5 stars. If you will leave an authentic review in your own words about the podcast or about different episodes that resonated with you, that helps people find it as well. And then also sharing it, of course, on social media or however you share it with your team or organization. Hey, here's an episode that resonated with me. Give it a listen. Let's have a talk about it, whatever that may be. That's the way these messages are amplified and spread in the world. And that's how they become, bigger and more impactful to the people. This is all free. So we're just trying to that's the goal of this, is to reach as many people as possible. So thanks for everybody that does that. So culture shaping takes place at all levels. We know that. It starts with us as individuals and our ability or inability to set the temperature we have committed to as a team or organization. So it happens at all levels, but it starts with us as individuals, but it spreads throughout an entire organization. So does the senior leadership team within any kind of group or team or organization, does the senior leadership team set the temperature in alignment with the future culture they are desiring to create? Obviously, when they do, there has a chance to cascade and spread. If there's cultural dissonance, which we've talked about on a past episode, go back and listen if you didn't listen to that one, because it's really, really important to this conversation. But if there is cultural dissonance, meaning they talk one way, but their actions are different, then the temperature that they set isn't in alignment with that desired culture. Do the manager levels, so beyond the senior leadership team, do manager levels set the temperature for the future culture they are committed to creating? Or again, is there cultural dissonance in there? Do supervisors, individual contributors, and frontline employees set that temperature as well? Or is there cultural dissonance along the way? All who are a part of the cultural ecosystem help shape the future culture. And as we remember, culture is dynamic, which means it's always changing. It's not static. It's always evolving, it's always growing, and it's always changing. And it's shaped moment by moment every single day by the way we think, act, and interact. Every single person within a cultural ecosystem helps create the culture, again, in healthy or unhealthy ways, by the way they think, act, and interact. Every person within a cultural ecosystem helps shape that culture. And one of the key segments of cultures that sometimes get overlooked are what I call, or what are often referred to in the work world as emerging leaders. Those who have been within the team organization for a while and showed a level of performance and an ability to lead that is promising for the future, but they're not quite in, the leadership role. They might be in a leadership role now, but they're not in the leadership role they someday will have. They are kind of emerging leaders within an organization. So, on today's podcast, we're talking about identifying and proactively supporting emerging leaders within your team and organization so they can blossom into the future cultural ambassadors your organization is going to need in order to thrive. But before we dive into today's topic, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. If you haven't done so already, we hope you'll visit Amazon or Amplify or jasonvbarger.com to check out Breathing Oxygen, my new book that is all about breathing good oxygen into ourselves and mindsets that fuel ourselves and the teams and the organizations around us. Positive, healthy thinking is as essential to great leadership and building a winning culture as the air we breathe. Leading yourself and a team of people has never been more complicated than it is today. As a leader, every move you make is either breathing life into your organization or slowly killing it. The atmosphere can easily turn toxic with negativity, blame, and doubt poisoning the culture. Just like every being on the planet needs good air to breathe, every organization needs leadership that breathes life into its people to sustain the energy required to complete its mission. Breathing Oxygen focuses on 6 key leadership mindsets that breathe life into any team: clarity, inclusivity, mental agility, grit, rest, and ownership. Join us, read, and share Breathing Oxygen.
Available now from Amplify Books on Amazon and jasonvbarger.com.
Okay, so we're talking today about emerging leaders and the critical role they play in the future health and strength of your culture. In a recent episode, you remember me talking about the idea of cultural dissonance. Within teams and organizations, cultural dissonance is when there is a tension or clash resulting from a lack of harmony between our actions and behaviors and the vision for the culture or the future that we are trying to create. Simply put, we say what we want, or that desired future culture. We say one thing, but our actions do not, and actions and behaviors do not back that up and aren't aligned with that future we say we want to create. And when there is a lack of harmony or a lack of alignment, it creates that kind of cultural dissonance. Again, if you didn't listen to that episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to it because it's really good and fascinating stuff if you've never thought about it this way. So let me give some examples, around cultural dissonance, just so we're talking the same thing. The leader that demands and preaches being prepared and doing the little things right and going the extra mile to prep for the moment. Again, I talked about this on that. They're always talking about doing the little things and going the extra mile and let's be prepared for the moment. But then that person who preaches that is continuously late to their own meetings, appears unprepared, or scattered in their behavior. They preach one thing for others, but their individual actions don't back it up, and it creates that kind of cultural dissonance, okay? So just so we're on the same page of what that means. So emerging leaders within cultures that have a lot of dissonance start to develop bad habits. So if the leaders that are, that they're looking at in management positions or senior leadership or anywhere across the organization, if they're experiencing a lot of dissonance and a disconnection between what we say the future culture we want is and the type of leaders and how we show up to do the work, we say one thing, but our actions don't back it up. In these cultures, a lot of the emerging younger leaders start to develop bad habits. And what they see and what they experience is that the way the culture is operating must be the way we want the future to be, and they end up just modeling what they're seeing from the other people. The unhealthy culture just perpetuates itself. And again, this is a story as old as time, that younger folks that watch older people in quote-unquote positions of leadership, or older, more experienced folks. That happens in family systems, in team systems, organizational systems. When we see people that are in these higher, quote-unquote, hierarchical, we see them as in these older, more mature positions, but yet their actions don't line up with that future we say we want, then it's natural for the younger emerging leader folks to start to adopt the same patterns. Obviously, in the healthiest cultures, the teams and organizations, the groups that are thriving and growing and becoming, stimulating progress, that, again, none of us are perfect, no person's perfect, no organization's perfect. So, of course, we've all made mistakes along the way. But the ones that are growing and stimulating progress to become new and continue to take the very best of the old, but continue to grow it into what the future needs to be, they understand that supporting the development of their emerging leaders is critical to the future health of their culture in many ways. Therefore, the best leaders and teams are proactive about supporting and developing their emerging leaders so that they form the very best habits, the best behaviors, the best approaches to how they lead that is in alignment with the uniqueness of their organization. They recognize that, hey, we don't want people to just rest on what they're going to see, maybe bad habits that have been accumulated along the way throughout the organization. We want to help teach them. What we teach differently triggers a different positive reaction. So these leaders and these organizations understand we've got to coach up and teach the very best habits, behaviors, and approaches so that that's the new wave that becomes the model, the behavior that we want people to see. We know it won't just naturally happen on its own, so we're going to have to lead it. We're going to have to coach it and develop it. They are committed to supporting them to thrive and grow as a part of their organization. That we want whatever your company is, we want them to understand uniquely who are we trying to be and what role they must play in doing that. So if you're thinking about this from the perspective of a leader or a team or organization, you're thinking about your team or your organization and man, how would I better support my emerging leaders? Here are four things that I just wanted. These aren't the only four things, but here are four things that we need that will help you kind of think about it first. The first thing is you got to identify them. You got to identify them. Who are they? The first step is to identify who the people are within your organization or your team that you can't afford to lose. Again, not just as a retention tool, but the reality is in the environment we've been in, if people aren't connected to your culture and don't think it's a positive place where they can grow, and they don't see that you are investing in their development, all the research tells us they will go somewhere else. So who are those people within your organization or team that you can't afford to lose? And you don't want them to develop bad habits along the way because they have the chance to be the future leaders in your culture or your organization. So who do you see promise in? Doesn't mean they're perfect, but who do you see promise in? Who has skills and abilities that you want to foster? Who are those you want to proactively develop? The second thing is, once we can identify who are those people, is let's clarify the behaviors. Clarify the behaviors. So then we have to be clear on how you want them to uniquely develop as part of your team or your organization. For your organization, what's going to be important? What are the values and behaviors that you want to be consistent throughout your culture? And what do they look like in action and behavior? What are those? And unique to your team and organization, what types of leaders and what type of culture are you trying to create? Can you articulate the ways in which you want your people to think, act, and interact into the future? What is that ecosystem that you're hoping to perpetuate or hoping to grow? So we've got to identify them, but then we also have to clarify those behaviors. The third is then we have to support their development. It won't just magically happen. So we got to support their development. We like to believe once we've identified them and we clarify the behaviors that it just naturally falls into place, but it won't magically happen. And more times than not, when it's left unattended, the people will develop bad habits and begin to think They aren't all that special because they don't see any special development designed for them. And perhaps they'll begin to look elsewhere. I want to go be part of a more meaningful culture where they value me and they're invested in my development moving forward. And statistics, again, tell us that people today want to know the organization is committed to their development. If they don't feel that way, they will go elsewhere. They'll go where they are identified as valuable and there is an action plan to help them develop. Supporting their, and it's got to be authentic too, not just here's a plan and some generic thing for them. It's got to be, specific for them and developed in a way that says you uniquely can help contribute to this future culture that we're trying to create. So supporting their development is absolutely about time and being able to tell that story of for them individually and for where you're trying to go as a culture. But it's also about resources that you commit to it in an investment in ways that show in transparency that this is important to you and your team and your organization. And you are invested in laying out a foundation for them so they can grow and prosper, and ultimately the organization can be healthier and better into the future. And this is the fun part of the path of really committing and diving in and helping to then design, which I'm lucky to be involved in many different companies, organizations, of helping that development path and helping them grow a plan to authentically connect with them to support the development of these emerging leaders. And then fourthly, again, the fourth thing, once we've identified them, once we've clarified behaviors, once we begin the process, it's a process, not overnight, but a process to support their development. We have a plan in place. Then we need to anchor it. And you've heard me in leading change and culture shaping that the sixth A, the last A of the culture shaping process is we got to make sure we anchor it. Don't stop with just a one-time program or one time we think we've developed them. We have to, over time, be committed to a longer process of developing leaders and anchoring the kind of behaviors and habits that we want. We need to help them build habits, practices, learnings that get anchored along the way in their current roles and their future roles. Anchor it by also identifying the next batch of emerging leaders to build upon the experience. To help perpetuate this cycle of development. It's not magic, but it does take intentionality. So some questions to ponder for today. What is weighing on you or those around you, so that you can just, as it relates to emerging leaders, who are those like if it's weighing on you that you don't even know who they are, let's ask these questions. Who are the people? Let's identify them. Who are the emerging leaders in your team and your organization? Can you name who are they? Can you clarify the behaviors that show up and what it is that you want for the future? What's your plan to support their development and to lay out a unique and authentic approach to their own development and the path forward to learn and develop that kind of practice and those behaviors? And lastly, what are you going to do to anchor it in their development over not only a year, but in the years to come? What's the plan forward? So I hope today's episode got you thinking in many new ways. If a deeper dive into any of these topics is interesting to you, please reach out to us. Email is info@jasonvbarger.com, info@jasonvbarger.com, and let us know. We'll continue to design content to help meet you where you are. Lastly, I'll just encourage you to go back and listen to a number of the past episodes. So many great topics out there that hopefully will add value to wherever you are, and share them with the people around you. Cheers to you and the path ahead. And I just remember that the future of leadership is you, it's me, it's us. And we need to get clear on that culture that we're trying to set, that culture that we want to be a part of creating. And then what is the temperature that we hope to set in order to realize that? And to be courageous and committed to breathe oxygen into the mindsets and actions that will sustain our path forward. Step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.